Do not read The 11th Metal, which is a short story in Arcanum Unbounded, related to the first era of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Do not read the postscript for that short story until you have finished the full trilogy. I cannot preface this enough. Don't do it. According to Brandon Sanderson in Arcanum Unbounded, right before the 11th Metal, which is a very, very short story, in this collection of short stories related to the Cosmere, there is the short story The 11th Metal. And I've seen it placed at different points for when you can read it in relationship to the first era Mistborn trilogy in the Cosmere. I've seen people place this short story before the Mistborn trilogy because chronologically it happens prior to the events in Mistborn. I've also seen people put it right after book 1 in Mistborn, and I've seen people say read it after the trilogy. When it comes to the short story itself, it's totally fine, honestly, to read it at any point. Even Brandon Sanderson in the Arcanum Unbounded, right before that short story, it says, and I quote, "This story may be read before the original Mistborn trilogy." And technically, yes, that is true, because again, chronologically, it happens before the first book in Mistborn. However, it's not going to be as strong of a start to the Mistborn trilogy if you read it beforehand. And most importantly, do not read the postscript. The postscript that follows right after this short story has major spoilers for the entire trilogy, in my opinion. I don't think you'll really understand what's a spoiler if you read the postscript, but it tells you some information. It's not the end of the world if you've already read it on accident. It's fine. It's just, it definitely includes information that reveals things about the first trilogy and reveals information, especially in that postscript. One of the paragraphs, it tells you things that you're really not going to find out until book 3, The Hero of Ages, in the first trilogy of Mistborn. So do not read the postscript. Okay, now that I've made that clear, do not read the postscript until you finish the trilogy. Okay, now that I've made that clear, where should you read this short story, The 11th Metal? Well, yes, you can technically read it before the trilogy, after book 1, or after book 3. What I would recommend is kind of mixed. I read it after book 3, which I think is the most ideal for getting all of the subtle hints that are happening in this short story that relate to what's going on for all of Mistborn Era 1, as well as some greater Cosmere stuff. Not a ton, not at all, but it relates just subtly to what's going on in the bigger story of the Mistborn trilogy beyond just book 1. So I feel like if you read it first before the trilogy, it's going to be an incredibly weak start because honestly, the 11th Metal isn't that much added to the Mistborn trilogy. It's not a bad short story. It's just also a really unnecessary first story. And so I wouldn't recommend starting with it because you really should enjoy the fullness of Mistborn itself as the first book. If you're going to be reading Mistborn Era 1, just start with Mistborn. Don't start with the 11th Metal. Not only is it a weak start, but also you're just not going to grasp the importance of the subtle intricacies of what's going on in this short story. So I would not recommend reading it before Mistborn Era 1. I would not recommend reading it after book 1, although you'll feel closest to the character in this short story because of the relationship to book 1. That's true. It's just, you'll feel closest to the character, but you still won't get the subtle hints as to what's going on in the background of the story. So yeah, I would recommend reading the 11th Metal after you finish the full Mistborn Era 1 trilogy. And then you can also read the postscript, and that's great. So you don't have to worry about accidentally spoiling yourself. As a quick review, spoiler-free, for this short story, I don't really even know how to rank it. It's so short and it doesn't add anything of particular interest to me. I don't dislike it. It's just not necessary. A lot of the information that we get in it is implied in the Mistborn trilogy. So I feel like I just didn't care that much about 11th Metal, to be completely honest. I don't think it added anything new for me. It didn't tell me any new information, not really. At best, it aids in some of the information provided in Secret History, which is the next short story that I read, which also should absolutely be read after Mistborn Era 1. Maybe you'll read it down the line even further, but do not read Secret History before Mistborn Era 1. Absolutely don't do that. 11th Metal gives some context for something that's very briefly mentioned in Secret History, so I don't even really want to give a star ranking to this because the 11th Metal is just so unbelievably short and really kind of unnecessary, in my opinion. Something else that I think is really important to mention is right before the 11th Metal, we have this map here. Ooh, I'm going to close it. Because if you have not finished Mistborn Era 1, don't look at that map. It's not like it's going to fully disclose a spoiler, but if you're really paying attention, you might grasp a spoiler from that map. So the map of the Scadrian system, which is in Arcanum Unbounded, you should not look at until you have finished the first era of the Mistborn trilogy. Okay? Whew. This is an incredibly short review. Really, it's just a warning that I want to put out to be very careful about not reading the postscript until you finish the first trilogy. But otherwise, the 11th Metal is kind of whatever. It's fine. It's fine. I didn't really care that much about it, to be completely honest. Next up, I'll be telling you about my review for Secret History. Keep reading what you love, and see you next time.